That's what it is. No, just a whore.
There we go.
Okay, members, we're still trying to get the final cleanup to send out what we've already finally done today. I'm going to let Mike here go ahead and handle calling out the delegate names, and they can come forward to Mike.
Delegate Tony Trevino, SD 21.
Tony Trevino.
Hang on a second. Can we get one of these stick mics back again for that, because that microphone does work.
That's a good idea.
I'll play A-B first.
All right. Is that better? Okay. Tony Trevino, Senate District 21. I am a delegate. I live in Stark County. I'm the Stark County Republican Chair. I'm also on the SREC, representing Senate District 21. Prior to closing primaries, I would ask the Republican Party of Texas to contract for an independent study to be done of the risks and benefits of closing primaries. The proposition on the ballot did not reference implementation. It's easy to agree with something that's very basic, like would you like to have closed primaries or not? In a perfect world, everybody would like to have closed primaries. The true concern about closing primaries that I have is that it will result in potential losses of statewide and national elections. And believe me, it could happen. In addition, I would also ask, are we no longer interested in growing the party with Hispanics and other minorities? Many counties in South Texas have Republican crossover voting in Democrat primaries. We don't have it going the other way. It's Republicans voting in the Democrat primaries. We haven't had a local elected official from the Republican Party in Stark County in over 100 years. So if you want to have a say-so in your local government, you have to vote in the Democrat primary. Our numbers are not large, but the number of voters in the Republican primary in Stark County from 2020 to 2024 increased by tenfold. In 2016 and 2018, and please listen to this, in 2016 and 2018, in the general election, the top of the ticket, meaning the presidential, the gubernatorial, the lieutenant governor, the U.S. Senate candidates, those Republican candidates received between 19 and 44% of the vote. This is in South Texas. This is Webb, Zapata, Starr, Cameron, Hidalgo. In 2020 and 2022, those same numbers rose to 31 to 53%. We're making real progress, and those are not outliers who've moved into the area. Those are Hispanics who have seen that the Democrat Party does not represent their values, that the Republican Party represents their values. So if they walk in to vote in a Republican primary and we reject them, that rejection is going to follow through all the way to the November election. And once you start talking about those kinds of numbers, you're talking about margins that can lose in statewide and national elections. So I'm not asking you to forego closed primaries altogether. I'm saying we need to do a study, we need a risk-benefit analysis, and it needs to be done through legislation, not through rule only. That is simply insane. You need to know, too, that Republican voters in South Texas are often putting their own families' opportunities in peril. Their child may not get a scholarship, their spouse may not get a promotion, their jobs are at risk. Our voters are truly courageous. If you think this doesn't happen in Texas, you are wrong. This does happen in Texas.
Time.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, SD 22, Delegate Dave Eagle. Rule 46.
My name is Dave Eagle. I'm at Senate District 22 out of Hood County, Texas, and we have a problem in Hood County, Texas. It's called an open primary. We're 80% Republican, and we have crossover voters, independents, and the dreaded Democrats voting in our primary and hurting the conservatives that run in our county. We find candidates who are conservative, grassroots, and they find someone that claims they're a Republican to run against them and dilute our grassroots party in Hood County. Actually, when we've got a lot of so-called Republicans that lie in our county because they're Democrats. So how do we fix this? Close primaries. I urge the state Republican Party to pass Rule 46 and call for a closed primary. The party runs its primary. The parties in Texas run their primaries, not the state legislature or anybody else. If the Republican Party of Texas passes this rule calling for a closed primary, we'll get to, the Secretary of State is either going to go along with it or we're going to get to test it in the courthouse. If challenged in the court, it will be on constitutional grounds for freedom of association. Freedom of association is a First Amendment right that will be scrutinized by the strict scrutiny standard of the Constitution, where the state is going to have to argue that it has a narrowly tailored interest in not letting us have a closed primary. If this goes to court, the closed primary, it will make it. In other words, whoever goes against it will fail, because this has been tested in other courts in other states. So I'm asking you to consider this. I know came close last couple of conventions. It was talked about quite a bit. In Hood County, we would like to see it. And so I urge you guys to take a really close, hard look. Go look at case out of Idaho, and there's other cases out there to look at that it will, if the state tries to enforce an open primary, they will lose. They will lose. Thank you.
SD1 Delegate Craig Lazard?
Lacardi.
Lacardi?
Hey, the microphone's at my level. That's great. All right. Greg Lacardi, Senate District 1, six-time RPT delegate, two-time national delegate, election judge, precinct chair, and a general thorn in the side to people who call themselves Republicans but aren't. So I talked to my representative, Matt Schaefer, about closing our primaries years ago, and he, from a legislatively doing it, and he told me that ship has sailed, but I'm glad to say that it has not sailed. It's right here. It just came into port. So this is awesome to see that we've got folks figuring out how to do this. I would offer a few suggestions. If I had the honor of sitting in one of the chairs with you guys, I would be doing this myself, but I'm going to throw these out there. I polled some of the folks back home, and we've got some things that might help perfect some of the language in the very first section. Can't see. In the first paragraph, adding not just a citizen of the United States, but also a resident of Texas. And folks who are 18 years old, sometimes when you're 17 and 10 months, you can also register to vote if it's your first time. In the section 1 of also has to meet one of the following. Individual voted in the Republican election, primary election, in the previous biennium shown in the records. That's good. Registered as a Republican, and that's addressed further down. Or if they certify that or submits a written certificate of affiliation with the RPT no later than when you can file for a place. So one of the things that came up was when someone, it's further from there where if you're not affiliated with another party, sorry, I'm looking for it again. Basically, not voted or taken an oath of affiliation in the current year. So what is that current year? Is that January through March, right before the primary? Or is it more specifically like 12 months before or 2 years prior? We need to figure out what that time frame needs to be so that we don't have folks who are Democrat their entire life and then they just file a piece of paper, autograph it, vote in our primary, and then that's it. So we need to put some safeguards in there so that it's more legitimate, so there's something, some kind of a vetting process maybe. So try to consider maybe some kind of language like that that would make this a little bit more, have a little bit more teeth in it. And I really like the end where it says this supersedes any other rule or law in the state of Texas because we are a private organization and we have the right to affiliate with who we want to and who we do not want to. Some of you guys might remember the lawsuit from Dennis Kucinich when he was a Democrat here. Some of the time? Okay. All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Senate District 3 Delegate Clint Stutz.
Clint Stutz, SD3. So should we do it? I lean toward maybe. There's lots of good reasons. And from the perspective of a block walker, I've knocked on lots and lots of doors, thousands of them. There are some problems with voter data when you have Democrats voting in your elections. You end up going to doors that you think are going to be strong Republicans, and they turn out to be Democrats that just vote in our elections. So voter data would be more meaningful if you did have closed primaries. As far as can we? Yes, you're going to have lawsuits filed. Yes, you can win those lawsuits. And yes, it does cost money, even if you're going to win. So if the party's going to get behind this, they need to actually fundraise on it. That's going to be necessary because you're going to have those extra legal fees. I guess you can mark me down as speaking on, not for or against, because the first person who spoke actually kind of got my attention. So there should be some deliberation on this.
Senate District 18 Delegate Kathleen Jackson.
Kathleen Jackson, Senate District 18 Delegate, incoming Aransas County Republican Party Chair. The only reason I did not lose is because people knew that the person I was running against used to be an Obama organizer in Florida. I won by 168 votes, ladies and gentlemen, out of 4,000, because she was a Democrat and wouldn't admit it. We have to close these primaries. Now, little birdie told me there have been 9 lawsuits, and closing primaries has won 9-0. I have also been told that us passing this rule will force a lawsuit, which is what we want. We want a lawsuit so that we can force the state to do what we want. It's our primary. It's not the state's primary. It's not the Secretary of State's primary. It's not the election administrator's primary. It's our primary. So either we can run our primary or keep dealing with Democrats coming in and taking over the party. Please do the right thing on this. The only question I have on implementation as written is how fast can I become a registered Republican and where do I sign up? That's really not actually stated in this. That's my only issue. Please make sure this moves to the floor. Thank you.
Senate District 22 Delegate Eric Blake.
Hello, Chair. Hello, Committee. Eric Blake, Senate District 22 Delegate from Ellis County. I am worried that as written, we may risk disenfranchising voters that have moved into Texas with sufficient time to register to vote. Remember, Texas says 30 days. There are some states that says same-day registration. We say 30. But if we require that you have to register, affiliate with the party by the first day of registering to become a candidate on the primary, that is a much earlier deadline. There will be people that move to Texas and want to register to vote, and then we say, sorry, you can't vote Republican because you didn't affiliate soon enough. You've got to make sure your wording is much nicer than the original proposal. I'm not saying you can't do it, I'm just saying be careful. I'm also worried, this is a paperwork and tax, or not, tax burden implication. I'm in a county that shares joint primaries. We have one poll site for Republican and Democrats. People come in, go through a single check-in line, and affiliate with the party in that line, and then are given the party's ballot according. Not all counties do this, but I'm worried that if you require the Republican primary to have different rules than the Democratic primary, counties may be forced to split their primaries into 2 locations, which means more poll workers. Can we do it? It's our primary, we can. Should we do it? That is your call. I'll be another one of these. I'm speaking on the, not for or against, but just on. Finally, focus on the legislative priorities. It's great that we have what we think will be a lawsuit we can win, but let's get the lawmakers to change the law to not be so repressive in the first place. We should be telling next door to get the ledge priority passed before we worry about the rules. Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, if there is another sheet back there, could we have that one brought forward and maybe start a third one?
Senate District 22, Delegate Amy Hedke.
Howdy, guys. Amy Hedke, SD22, Ellis County Delegate. I do support the premise of asserting our rights of affiliation via rule and have argued as much with Rule 44. The biggest hangups to Rule 44 was that, you had the threat of county chairs being personally sued and the very real costs of defending themselves. And while I think we have found a fix for that concern via a checkbox option for Rule 44, there is not a similar fix for 46. I will flat out ask, is the Republican Party of Texas prepared to fund 254 county lawsuits? Because right now the recent budget doesn't look like they are. I do sympathize with the chairs who are opposing this as a rule change, but I still urge you to adopt this as a rule change, not just as a legislative priority, and assert those party rights of affiliation. This needs to happen sooner than later. There are already numerous SCOTUS decisions affirming that the party will prevail, but that's still not cheap. Regardless, no rule will stop people registering to cross over. John Bolgiano is a delegate here. He's in legislative priorities right now, but he has shared how he used to do exactly that before escaping Yankee land and fleeing to Texas. Also, it was asserted somewhere online that Republican Party of Texas would still get state money if we closed the primaries. And I'd love to hear that specifically addressed during committee discussion if anybody knows the answer one way or the other. My guess is no. But I would like to see both of these rights of affiliation exercised. Rights not exercised atrophy. And Texas needs to be leading in this stuff. We shouldn't be waiting for Idaho to do this. I will not be here tomorrow. So, I know. But anyway, thank you.
We've got one more speaker filling out the form at the moment. Are there any others in the room that wish to speak on Rule 46? Looks like maybe one more is going to sign up.
Chairman, while we're waiting, do we have access to this?
I just sent it to you.
Okay.
It was in one of the earlier emails, but I just sent it along with a PDF of what we've done today.
Email or signal?
SD 25 Delegate Chris Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, while he's coming up, I did put the text of the SREC draft of 46 into our chat system. People were asking for that wording.
SD 25, Chris Saunders. I go by my middle name Shane, though, for those who've already met me today and wondering. Just wanted to say I helped out locally with one of our elections, and I'm actually helping in another city when I can with their election because it went to a runoff. Because I feel strongly against people that claim to be a Republican that are winning local elections. I helped a guy beat somebody here locally. We got rid of one who was, in my opinion, a rhino if he was a Republican. Glad to see him gone and look forward to the guy that ran beating him. Point being, it would be a lot easier if we didn't have so many Democrats voting in the primaries. Obviously, you're not going to be able to stop them all. I know that. We all know that. But I look forward to hopefully this body coming up with something that it's at least a beginning of a solution, if not a final solution, but something that'll definitely help make things better. Because I moved back to San Antonio 6 years ago, told my wife and daughters what a great place it would be here. And man, has it gotten liberal since I moved away after college. And I'm fed up, and really fed up. So help us out, guys. I don't want the state going purple from bad politicians up in the state.
Thank you, Shane. Was there someone else that signed up on the list in the back? I don't know where it's being kept. Just go ahead and bring it forward.
SD 20. Delegate Ian Camacho.
Hi, my name is Ian Camacho. I'm a delegate SD. Incoming precinct chair. Sorry, can you hear me? No, let's take this thing off. This might be easier. Or that one. I don't know which one it is. Or this one. One of these three. Okay. Overall, I do support this. We saw this happening in Wyoming with Cheney appealing to Democrats, and we saw it in Haley's desperate attempt. I kind of think it's actually sad, so I almost part of me just likes it for the comedy's sake, but yeah, I think we should close it. I think I do have issues with the wording, the way it's phrased. Right now, at least in that proposal, it states that the first data file for a place on the primary ballot would be basically the cutoff. And I'm not sure if they mean for anyone who's eligible for the primaries or the precinct chairs, because of the cutoff. I mean, the earliest you can do as a precinct chair would have been in September 12th, 2023, which is a very early cutoff. So maybe we should make it a bit later. Perhaps the deadline to register to vote. Even if we were talking at the beginning of the primaries for any candidate and the general would have been November 11th, that's still a very, very early cutoff. Like someone out there said, it's 30 days and then you're considered a resident of that county. Something closer to that would probably make more sense. I also think we could probably cut that little line, I think under section 3, oh, is that it? Oh, under section 3 or something, I think it's the third, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at it. It's the one about the Republican election or the runoff, because I don't think you can't vote in the runoff if you haven't voted in the primary. I think that's a little redundant. In part 1, excuse me. Yeah, I think that's just a little redundant. But also to the address of, I forgot the woman who was speaking about the concern about Democrats and Hispanics. I mean, I am half Hispanic, and I do agree with you that we want to have people cross over who are actually disaffected or independent, who are saying, you know, I'm no longer happy with my party. They do exist, and they are genuine, and we should try to welcome them in. But at the same time, we also don't want to pander, and we also just need to try to see if, you know, we want to say if they're serious, they should have some level of accountability and stuff. That's it. Thank you.
Members, you should have in your email now both, or all three, PDFs of our committee rules, PDF of supplemental rules, and PDF of what Virgil Cruz transmitted from the SREC. Before I go into actually consideration of 46, is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to testify specifically on Rule 46? Okay, seeing none, a motion to start the discussion to put Rule 46 on the table would be in order. Rachel?
Rachel Hooper, SD 13. I move to adopt Rule 46 as presented to this committee by recommendation of the SREC.
Second. Several seconds. Okay. Thank you, Rachel. And without objection, Mr. Jim Pickle, who originally authored what became the SREC Rule 36, is in the room somewhere, and he's offered to address some of the intricacies, the questions you may have, some of them raised by the delegates, et cetera, et cetera. So, Jim?
It should be Rule 46, by the way.
Is that what I said?
You said 36.
I'm not ready for 36.
I was expecting to be out of here by now.
Jim, can you walk back to the back
Yes.
and come back up again?
As Mark said, my name is Jim Pickle, SD8 delegate. I'm also on the SREC. I'm the vice chair of the Rules Committee on the SREC. This is my 6th convention, and I'm really tired of having Rule 46 or closed primaries talked about and nothing being done about it. So I authored a rule, and you see it before you. It had some help from especially Rachel. A couple of other people on the SREC Rules Committee helped me tweak it. There's a couple other tweaks you guys might want to consider after I finish talking. But just for purposes of kind of some background, I mean, you ever notice how no coaches let the other team's coach pick their starting quarterback? You know, it never happens. Why? Why does that never happen? Primaries are really not elections. They're selections. Okay, we're not electing anybody to office in a primary. We're just selecting our team. That's what we're doing. Why should the Democrats be allowed to select our team? And vice versa. Why should we be allowed to select the Democrats' team? It's a nonpartisan issue. It really is. Experience in 50 other states with closed primaries and court decisions have said that having closed primaries does a number of things. It purifies the candidates and hence the issues. In other words, you get a more polarized candidate pool because think about it. If you're running in the Republican primary, you don't have to pander to the middle of the electorate because they're not going to be voting for you in the primary. So you don't have to pander to any of the middle-of-the-road purple issues. You have to get the hard right red issues before people will vote for you. So it makes the candidates more pure. Same thing with Democrats, makes them more pure too. And between you and me, I want to see less purple. I want to see more red and blue. Because I think if the citizens see more red and blue, they'll flock to the red. The blue people, they're crazy. The Democrats are insane. I mean, they can't even tell what a woman is, right? So I think if enough people see that, the problem is right now with open primaries, we got a lot of purple. Got a lot of purple in the electorate, a lot of purple issues. This stops that. I call it the anti-purple rule. Okay? Makes candidates more red because candidates do not need to pander to the middle. If centrist voters aren't serious enough to sign up for a party, they shouldn't help us pick our team. So people say, well, we're going to alienate the middle. Yeah, we are. We are going to alienate the middle. If they want to be on our team, they can help us pick the quarterback. If they don't, if they're just going to sit up in the stands, they can come vote in the general election, but I don't want them messing with our candidates. Let's let our principles, our Republican principles, undiluted, go into the public arena and fight for acceptance. That's what we need to do, all right? And that's what this rule does. People in Democrat counties will not like this rule because, as a couple of them have said so far, they like the fact that if they're in a heavy Democrat county, they get to cross over as Republicans and vote in the Democrat primary to get the, I guess you call it the least Democrat candidate or the more center candidate to run in the Democrat primary. I don't think that's any more fair than them doing the same thing to us. And I appreciate the fact that's where they feel like that's where they live, that's what they've got to work with. I appreciate that. I don't agree with it. I'm confident if our principles will come forward, they will prevail. Also, I'm not sure a lawsuit's going to be necessary. Imagine you're Ken Paxton for a minute. There are 9 identical lawsuits just like this one that the AGs have lost 9-0. Do you really want to be the 10-0 Attorney General? I don't think he'll take it. I don't think it'll take a lawsuit. Nobody's going to run into that brick wall face first. He's just not going to do it. What'll end up happening is we pass this rule, then we go to the legislature and we say, I can get Judge O'Connor to force you to do this, or you guys can just read the writing on the wall and do it without the expense and time of litigation. This will almost plug and play right into the current election code, where it says in the election code now who becomes a Republican voter. We just substitute some of these words for what's in there now, and we have closed primaries just like that. And anyone can come up with a parade of horribles about what'll happen if we do this. Anybody can do that. But we don't live with a spirit of fear, right? We're not going to worry about all the nasty, bad things that might happen, like 254 lawsuits. It's not going to happen, folks. It just isn't. Ken Paxton's not going to do that. I would make 2 tweaks to this, and I'm not in the position on the committee, but here's the 2 things I would change on my own rule, so if you'll give me a little bit of grace to correct my own, after thinking about it a little while, mistakes. First, I would change the citizen of the United States. I'd make that a citizen of Texas. If you're a citizen of Texas, you are a citizen of the United States. And I don't want Ohioans coming down here and voting in our elections either. So I changed citizen of the United States to citizen of Texas. And it's been brought up, I would require that whoever seeks affirmation under Part 3, okay, that the individual completes an oath of affirmation, okay, there's got to be a time for them to do that. The way it's written right now is it's on the first day for candidates to file for office. This last election cycle, that was November 11th. If you have candidates filing for office on November 11th and thousands of people filing oaths of affiliation on the same day, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be a complete disaster for the election workers. So I would back that date up. I'd back it up maybe 30 days before the first day to file, or maybe 60 days before the first day to file. Obviously, the intelligence of this body is going to be better than I can dream it up. There's got to be a cushion in there. There's got to be a time period where we're not doing everything on the first day to file for office. Those are the only 2 changes I would make. Mark told me if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I've read all the lawsuits. I can tell you all about what happened in those. Yes, sir.
Should there be anything here? Oh, sorry about that. Should there be anything in Rule 46 as it relates to county residency or county verification of this process?
What's in there now? What's in the election code now?
In the election code, I'm not sure. I'm
Okay.
talking about.
I know. What I'm saying is this will plug right into the other language that's there now about how you pick a Republican voter. This is how we're going to pick Republican voters from now. So if there's county issues, those don't change, right? I hope I answered your question. Yes, Kristen.
Jim, would you be opposed to, in line 3, that maybe that they fill out a written certification and file it 30 days prior to the primary? Because that does give people who have recently moved into the state more time to register as a Republican and vote in our primary.
Yeah, I'm not on the committee, but that's something you could definitely bring up to your...
But you wouldn't be opposed to that, in your opinion? Is there something problematic about that?
There's already something in there about that. Let me look real quick. I've got a copy of it, which I've emailed or texted a bunch of you guys. Yeah, the written certification of affiliation form will be created and approved by the SREC. That's right under number 3. And it'll be made available for download. So what that form looks like would be up to the SREC.
Well, I think that's good, but I think for the filing of it, I think to give people more time to make sure that they have that oath of affiliation in, because I do believe that the point was well taken by the delegate who testified that there are people who move in from out of state.
Right.
They move in after the filing period for the primary. And so in order to get those people registered properly and affiliated, then it would be good if we could move that a little bit closer to the primary to give them more time to get that oath of affiliation in.
Maybe it's one of those kind of things where you just don't get to vote in this election cycle. I mean,
Well, it could be,
if
but-
you want to hunt elk in Wyoming, you have to put in for the lottery, and you got to do it a year in advance. And if you do it 11 months in advance, you get into the next lottery. You don't get to vote this season. You don't get to hunt this season.
Is there a problem with, I guess what I'm asking, is there a problem with moving that date closer to the primary election?
The only thing I can think hypothetically to your hypothetical question is, I don't want people crossing over and affiliating with the Republican Party just to do what they're doing now. And if you move it away from the first day for candidates to file for office, they don't know who's going to be on the ballot. And so they can't glom on to a candidate and decide to change parties or become a Republican, right?
Mhm.
So I think we need to have some space in there before the first candidate files for office. Somebody said too, I guess the precinct chairs or something is even earlier, right? It's even earlier in the process. When are precinct chairs elected? They're not on.
They're a month before
have
the
a bigger
primary
window.
filing. They start in September.
The filing is different.
Okay.
And what,
The filing deadline, the date to file is different? Is that what you're saying?
They got a bigger window. They start in September, and then the chairs start later in November, like a regular candidate.
Oh, okay, so precinct chairs had to file in September.
September
and
through all the way up.
And November 11th was for like state reps and stuff. Okay.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Jim, I can think of two exceptions, and one of them has been mentioned, but one is military.
Can we get the microphone where everybody can hear?
Okay, is this on? Okay. We have huge military bases in Texas, and I wouldn't want to penalize someone coming into the state that's in the military. I would think that 30 days is plenty, just like the current law. And the other exception is, my sweet bride of 46 years is a recovering Californian, but she voted
Congratulations.
for Alan Keyes once. So she's pretty conservative. I've spent a lot of time in California and in the Valley and Exeter and Porterville and Visalia. They're as conservative as we are.
There are no blue states. There are only blue cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of conservatives
But
in California.
I would think an exception to people moving in from out of state would be reasonable to keep it at 30 days, just like it is now.
Yes, sir.
I would just like to say the current language on the deadline is fine. It says no later than the first day.
Right.
Now, exceptions for people that move in after that, that's something we could look at, but I don't think we need to extend it out any other because people can still file ahead of that deadline. There's nothing prohibiting that.
I'm just thinking of the logistics of having two things happening on the same day.
Well,
maybe that's a parade of horribles.
if people
Maybe it
want,
wouldn't
if
happen.
people want to run for office, they can file ahead if they know it's going to be an issue. That's just the deadline. The other thing is, I was raised in Louisiana. Louisiana has closed parties, always has. It doesn't prevent, it never, in the 30 years I lived there, it never prevented any of the problems I've heard people saying that closing the primaries is going to solve. It just doesn't. So,
Louisiana has, in the Chisholm case, they now have closed primaries for their judges, too. Yes, sir.
Dave Wilson, SD 11. What about special elections? Someone could vote in a Democrat primary, and then a special election comes along. They could affiliate with the Republican primary, Republican Party, and vote in the special election primary.
You mean a special election for like constitutional amendment or something, or?
Someone that resigns from office, dies in office, something of that nature. They have a special election to fill a seat.
Well, there's still a time for the candidates to file for office to fill that seat, right?
It's not a primary.
not always.
No.
Well, if their
No.
spouse doesn't fill it. I mean,
Not always.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you know who to vote for if they haven't filed to run?
No.
No, it's yeah, the party
Mr.
can
Chairman.
appoint in the window.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Right.
Yes.
A special election in Texas is run like a general election.
Right.
We have just seen that, for example, in SD 15. That is different. This is our primary elections. I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah, I think that's. I think
Thank
that's
you,
fair.
Rachel. I was about to say something.
Yes, sir.
Dwayne Wright, SD5. So I agree with everything you said, but I have a couple of questions. Earlier today, we tried to adopt a rule, and the parliamentarian said, and I quote, "We cannot create a supplemental rule that conflicts with the RPT rules." So when I look at 163.003 of the Texas Election Code, it specifically says the rules adopted by a political party must be consistent with state law. So what's the word? I want closed primaries, but I don't, there's a disconnect there. I don't see rules of construction and all following. So what's the thought on that?
Here's how our legal system works. Party rules, statutes, the United States Constitution.
Right.
Okay? If the statute is in conflict with the Constitution, the statute falls.
Right.
That's what those 9 cases have all been. Freedom of association, First Amendment, strict scrutiny cases. They say, your rule, Mr. Election Code, is in violation of the Constitution. It is struck. It is a nullity.
Okay.
That's what happens.
Okay.
And the legislature can then come back and put into the election code if they want to, although we're trying to distance ourselves from the election code if anybody was here at the last convention, and they can come in and try to do it themselves. The other thing people say is, well, are we going to get money? Is the Secretary of State still going to run the website? Still going to vote the voter rolls? Are they still going to send out applications to apply to be a voter? Yes, they're still going to do all that because, again, this just plugs into what's there now. And I can't see the Secretary of State, Jane Nelson, saying, "Oh, I'm so against this. I'm just going to violate the law." It isn't going to happen.
So the second question is, who's on the hook if there is litigation?
Whoever
county
files
chair?
the lawsuit, probably state chairman. Yeah.
So
On the hook. I mean, you mean financially?
Well,
or?
so right now, county chairs are filing authorities. They're the local filing authority. The state chair is, of course, the state's filing authority. If we're going to write a rule that's possibly going to be litigated, and we can all guess whether it is or not,
Right.
you know,
Right.
Who's going to be the subject of the litigation in a local race? It's going to be the county chairs.
Yeah, the party would obviously come to the defense of its rule, right? That's all of us in the SREC. They're going to come to the defense of the rule they pass.
But the named person on the complaint is going to have to be the local party chair who did not accept it because of the party rule.
Well, I didn't want to get too much in the weeds on this, but what they did in Idaho is we filed the lawsuit. We preemptively filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the election code. Asked the district judge to declare it unconstitutional and strike it, and that the state is a nominal defendant because the Constitution is the issue in the case.
Well,
That's one way to do it.
We're the state rules. We love the weeds.
I've noticed. I've been here since like 9 this morning.
Just with, like knowing the logical path. I mean, not that we don't trust people, but I like to just wrap my head around exactly
We
the logic.
originally asked Jim to be here at, what, 1:30, I think? Yeah.
We didn't.
What do you mean we, paleface?
Well, okay.
This guy back here has hand.
Thank you. Jim, and I appreciate Jim, I appreciate your work on this, and I share the sentiment, but I do have a few questions regarding implementation. Under provision 2, what is the process for an individual to be registered as a Republican with the Republican Party of Texas, and how is that process defined, and what redress is there if that process is not followed?
Well, if you register to vote, you have to register to vote, right? You can't just walk into the polling place. You have to be on the list.
Sure.
Secretary of State will send you an application, or you can go online and fill out an application to be registered to vote. When you fill out that application, now it will have 2 check boxes on it, D or R. And you don't have to check either one, in which case you're an independent. But if you check one or the other, then you're registered in that party.
And so to the extent, let's assume that works. Okay. You can, in theory, do that up to 30 days before the primary election, not the November or September before. And you register with your local primary election clerk or county clerk, tax assessor, whatever county you're in. That's not necessarily registering as a Republican with the Republican Party of Texas as stated in the rule. That's noting your affiliation on your application to register to vote with your local election official. And that seems to be somewhat different. There's a distinction, but also a difference between those two. And so I mean, I guess that you've answered my question. And the second question that I have is where it says you are eligible to vote in a Republican primary. And I mean, and at the end it says this rule supersedes any law of the state of Texas. What if, as a Bexar County resident, I felt really persuaded to vote in a Ellis County Republican primary? What in this rule that purports to supersede all Texas law prevents me from doing that?
The current, just this part doesn't supersede. It just says this is the only way you can become a Republican voter. It doesn't say it supersedes the election code. It just says this is the only way you can become a Republican voter.
But it says this rule supersedes any other rule. Then if you go up to the top, it says only citizens of the United States who qualify as a Republican may cast ballots in those elections.
That's
and
right,
it says
okay.
in primary elections and primary runoff elections. And so my concern is by saying this entirely supersedes any state law, this rule does not provide any residency requirement. It says a Republican primary. And as long as I check box 1, 2, or 3, it supposes that I could vote in any one that I choose.
Why do you suppose that? Can you do that now?
Well, you can't, but that's because the Texas election code tells me I can't. This rule says the Texas election code no longer applies.
Okay, that's a paraphrase of what that actually says. That doesn't say the election code doesn't apply.
Well, all right, so it says it supersedes,
Right,
but the
for purposes of
qualification-
becoming a Republican voter. That's right.
I mean, is there a way to perhaps tie it? I don't know I know it's in the election code, but I don't know what the residency requirements are. But it does seem to me like, and I know this is a draft that we're here to work on, but I think you've answered my questions. I appreciate your time, sir.
The other thing I would caution everybody about is when you talk about statutes and rules, less is more. Okay? For instance, if I have to defend this rule in court, I don't want it to be 6 times longer than it is now. Because every word you add to this, in fact, if you cut some words out, that'd be great. Every word you add is another bullet the other side can shoot back at us and potentially derail this thing. So less is more. We want it to be as short and sweet as it needs to be effective, and no more. Don't add a bunch of window dressing on this thing, because every time you do, that's another avenue for them to get in behind it and erode it and maybe knock it out. So I'd caution this committee to be very diligent and very jealous with their words if they're going to add anything. Yes, sir.
So Jim, Ronnie Jones, SD 12. So whenever you're talking about this rule supersedes any other rule, it's basically in a nutshell only what applies to these few things. It doesn't supersede like the residency requirements. It doesn't supersede all of the election code regarding elections, just these pieces.
Yeah, you can't rob banks. Okay. The penal code still applies. I mean, it doesn't supersede all law. It supersedes the things that this rule talks about, which is how you become a Republican voter. No court's going to read that as we're saying we don't have to follow any of the laws of the state.
Keith Nielsen, SD6. I'm always concerned with the unintended consequences. I'm for closing the primaries, but it seems like that this should be kind of handed off as a priority to the legislator to address.
If they're staring down the barrel of a 12-gauge shotgun in 9-0 federal and U.S. Supreme Court cases, the legislature's going to fix it.
What I see happening is 100,000 people or more in a state in a primary being rejected to vote, and the Democrats calling foul and voter suppression in a major lawsuit. That's kind of where I see it going. I mean, I live in Harris County. These people are they're going to go after us.
Yeah.
I just, like I said, the unintended consequences. I'm all for this, for closed primaries.
Well, this committee, maybe you can figure out a way to, make that. Yes, ma'am. Sorry,
Okay.
Kristen.
That's okay. No, the legislature is, in your opinion, will the legislature close the primary?
Yes.
No, I mean without this rule.
No.
Okay. So clarify, without this rule, You do not believe that the legislature will close the
I have
primary?
30 years of experience
Okay.
that they haven't closed it yet.
And why do you think they will close it with this rule?
Because Reed O'Connor sitting on a federal bench in Wichita Falls ready to enforce this and strike everything in the election code that this is opposed to.
Okay.
It's pointing a shotgun at Ken Paxton saying, or the legislature actually saying, change it, or I'll have Reed O'Connor change it for you. Those are your two choices. It's going to get changed one way or the other.
Okay. One more question.
Yeah.
You said that we need to be careful with how many words are in this. We don't need to add words. If anything, we need to remove words. Can you tell us anything in here that you would remove in order to strengthen the lawsuit that will be filed if the legislature doesn't?
Not in keep it in grammatically correct English. I mean, the Rules Committee went through this. It was slightly longer than this. We went to the Rules Committee. We cut it down a lot, the Rules Committee. I mean, could I tweak it if you were paying my hourly rate? Yeah, I could probably spend a couple hours and tweak it down for you, but I've got all you guys to do that for me. So, yeah. And I trust this committee. I've listened to you guys. I mean, this is a thoughtful bunch of people. So I think you guys will get it done. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what would obligate the Secretary of State to change the voter registration form to say D or R? Since we're a private club saying it, what would make them have to do that?
No, because either the legislature will tell the Secretary of State to do that on the threat of the lawsuit, or a federal judge will tell the Secretary of State to do that in a judgment.
And since the Ds are not closing their primary, why would D even be an option? They don't have a closed primary.
The Ds will close their primary 5 minutes after we pass this rule, I promise you.
And
They're not going to have the disadvantage of us being able to vote in their primaries, and they can't vote in ours.
So are you saying that all the millions of people who are registered to vote right this minute in the state of Texas are going to have to re-register to vote in order to get registered?
You have to re-register
by
to vote every
affiliation?
year.
So everybody has to get re-registered?
Yeah, you have to re-register every year, yeah. Yes, ma'am, or yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, wait, no, you want her to go?
No, I was just misgendering you, I'm sorry.
Mike Snyder, SD9. There are 17 states that currently have closed primaries.
Or partly closed, right?
Or partly closed. But the majority, or the most pejorative statement that I can hear from people that are opposed or are questioning it are saying, oh, we're going to face all these lawsuits and all this. Out of those 17 states, how many lawsuits have been stacked up against them? The whole point that I'm trying to make here is there is not a swarm of lawsuits in these states to end closed primaries. Iowa, to be example, Kansas, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Florida, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, New York, Maine, Rhode Island, Maryland. You're not seeing a flood of lawsuits there. The bottom line is, and another complaint that we've heard is, oh, we're going to lose our importance in the national elections. Well, how does that, ask somebody from Iowa how that's worked out for them.
Yeah, they still count.
Yeah, so the bottom line is, would this not also open an avenue for us to actually have more importance in a presidential contest as opposed to a diminished role?
100%. I'm trying to make the Republican Party 100 times stronger than it is right now. That would be my ultimate goal. And this is one step in that direction. Yes, sir.
I always look at issues and try to figure out what the unintended consequences of a particular action.
You have a
might
brother
be.
up here. He just said the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, I know. Bexar County, the majority of the election judges in Bexar County are not Republican.
Okay.
There are not enough Republican election judges in most cases to even have a Republican judge at a polling place.
Okay.
Are the election judges going to be the final arbiter of who can and can't vote in the Republican primary? And if so, are we going to have Democrat judges telling Republicans they can't vote in their own primary?
I think that's less likely than having an unfaithful Democrat election judge allowing Democrats who are not registered as Republicans to vote in the Republican primary. In other words, letting them cross over. I think that's more of a risk. I don't think anybody's going to tell a Republican they can't vote. It's on your voter registration
Just looking
card.
at
It says
unintended
R.
consequences
I know.
here.
And you can't, no rule can fix all of human nature's sin nature. We can't do that. People are going to lie, they're going to cheat, they're going to steal. You know, all we can do is the best we can to try to push the ball forward to where we want it to be. And then hopefully courts will iron out the rest of it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jim. I know you've put a lot of effort into this. As I identified myself earlier, I'm from SD 20. I represent Nueces County, Jim Wells County, Brooks County, and Hidalgo County. Hidalgo County has maybe 60 or 80 miles of Rio Grande River. I also have very dear friends. The new chair of Cameron County has maybe another 80 miles down on the Mexican border. I'm friends with the Stella McKee over in Willacy County. These are all far south Texas counties. We also heard from Tony Trevino. I don't know if she's still here. She's over in Starr County. She's probably got even more miles. So the concerns I'm hearing from the majority is they are very concerned that it's going to hurt them. So I'm kind of wondering if it's just a one-size-fits-all. One of the things I'm being asked, well, and I want your thoughts on this, what do you think about giving each county executive committee a choice on will it work better for them? Or could they have open primaries, closed primaries? They make the decision for their county. So anyway, they want like Tony Trevino was saying, they want the Republican Party to grow. Everybody does, but they're just not sure about this. They're fearful it's going to actually hurt them. I hear. Anyway, I'd like to hear your.
If you're in a deep blue county, you long for the day when it becomes purple, because that means they're moving in the right direction. Right? If you're in a deep red county, you loathe the day when it becomes purple because you're going the wrong direction. Okay. So yeah, minority counties that have mostly Democrat. I said at the beginning of my talk that they're not going to like this because it stops them from making their blue county purple. And I also said this is the anti-purple bill. We need to stop sitting on the fence. We need to stop having rhinos. We need to stop having half measures taken by our candidates where they don't act like Republicans. We need to put something in place that basically requires them, if they want to get reelected, to abide by our principles, because they have to win the vote of the people in this room right here. And none of these people are purple. We're their electorate now. Well, and they're going to be stronger Republicans for it.
It seems like immediately that this is probably going to help 95% of Texas. I've heard a lot of good arguments for that. I'm just concerned about my constituents that are down on the border. Should they maybe have an opportunity to turn more purple or something before they, close the gate, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't know. In Deep Blue County, we do this. I don't know if our principles and our priorities and who we are as Republicans is going to be enough to draw those people out of their Democrat stronghold or not. But I bet it will. May not do it tomorrow. May not do it next week. But eventually, the problem is nobody's flocking to the Republican Party because we got a purple system. They don't have to make a choice. They don't have to pick a team. They can be in the middle. And guess what? If the electorate's in the middle, guess who else is in the middle? The politicians. Everybody's in the purple middle. I'm trying to separate it so we have the good guys and the bad guys where there's no gray, vague way for them to escape. You're either in or you're out. You're hop or you're low. There's no middle ground anymore. I don't want there to be middle ground. Middle ground is the death of politics.
I agree with everything you just said. I just wonder if some of these very, very deep south counties should make the decision when they do that switch.
If you do county by county, I don't know how you do that. I just can't. I can't see it logistically happening. I don't know. You'd have to have a whole other registration system because when you register to vote, you register to vote as a Texan. I mean, you don't register as a Hidalgo County citizen. That's your address on but the same. Your card is exactly like mine. They're the exact same voter registration card, even the same color, right? You'd have to have a multiple election system. I just don't see how that would work. This is going to create enough logistics. I'm not sure how you would do it with 254 individual counties, half of them deciding they want to have open and closed primaries. I understand your concern. I'm just not sure that's the answer to fix it.
This is great stuff. Before we go to Bruce, is there any objection to extending our time? It's actually been a little over 30 minutes at this point. Seeing none? Okay. Was Bruce next or was it Suzanne? I couldn't tell.
Okay. Go ahead.
Suzanne Guggenheim, SD 27,
two things. First, on the fact that we are a private club, I don't think the change of rules going to a closed primary does change our status. We already are and are considered as such, and that's why we organize our own primaries. So I don't think that will affect our status. The second one is the cost. There is no reason the cost would be higher because we have a closed primary. It should be the opposite. The local county will be able to know how many Republican ballots and Democrat to print depending on the registration instead of having to not know and do the double.
Yeah, there's an unintended consequence that's favorable. It could be cheaper to run the elections, yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi, Bruce Campbell, SD 24. So I favor a closed primary. I'm with you on that. I now understand your procedure of wanting to trigger a lawsuit to get the Supreme Court to throw out the current law as being unconstitutional. And I want to get to that. And my question is, how do we get from where we are? Because I'm a rules guy, I'm on the rules committee, and I need to be able to pass something here that follows the rules, where our Rule 5 says our parliamentary authority is the U.S. Constitution, the state of Texas, and our rules, which Rule 5 here, and Robert's Rules of Order. And
Used to have the election code in it before the last convention, you know.
I know,
We
but
took
stay
that
with
out,
me.
yeah.
So Roberts, we didn't get rid of Roberts, right? Still in here. And Roberts says in 39.5, and this is the question I want you to help me with, because I want to get there. Motions that conflict with the corporate charter, constitution, or bylaws of a society, or with the procedural rules prescribed by national, state, or local laws, are not in order, and any motion of this kind is adopted, it is null and void. I just need to know, how do we get from here, where we're sitting here today, to where you want to go and not be ruled null and void?
That you got to put in that sentence the implied word lawful statutes and rules.
But it doesn't let us decide what's lawful.
No, a court will
here.
do that. A court will do that. A court, 9 times the court has said election code statutes like we have in Texas are unconstitutional. They violate our right to freedom of association. So you can't have, Robert's Rules doesn't say you have to follow illegal law. It implies in that it's legitimate law. And the problem right now is the election code is not legitimate. It's unconstitutional. It infringes our right of free association.
So is it your, do you believe we get to decide that in this committee?
No,
if
the
it's
federal court will
constitutional?
decide it, but we got to give them something. We got to give them something to work with. We have to give the judge something. We have to give him a case or controversy, which this creates. This creates a tension now between party rules and the state election code. Now we have a case or controversy a judge will step in to fix. Without this rule, there's just the statutes, and nobody's challenging them. I mean, they're just. I mean, I guess I could file a lawsuit just to strike the election code, but you know, which is what this would do. But this is the trigger. This sets up the case or controversy for the federal court. Yes, sir.
Keith Nielsen, ST6, and again.
I hope that answered your question because it was a good one.
Well, I think we just have to try to ignore Roberts right now to get there, is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Keith Nielsen, SD6. Again, I'm for closing primaries. I just randomly did Iowa.
Your mic's off.
43 in their election code.
Start over, could you? We missed
Yes, Keith Nielsen, SD6. I just randomly picked out one of those states that you pulled in, and Iowa in 43, chapter 43. It is in their election code, their closed primaries, and I'm assuming that most of them are, all of them are. So, and I understand the challenge, and we do need to challenge stuff. Just because a bunch of guys got in a room and made some laws that don't make that right. But what my concern is, what kind of fund is there going to be set up to challenge these things with dollars? I mean, do we bog down every county with hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawsuits to get to that, to flip that that deal.
As a lawyer, I mean, that's music to my ears.
So I'm just wondering how many elections do we lose and get distracted while we're trying to undo something? That, like I said, the unintended consequences is always a big thing with me. Thank you.
Let's him.
Jim, Ronnie Jones again, SD12. With his notion of unintended consequences, does any of this affect procedurally what the counties should be doing? Because like I know in our county, in Denton County, our primary administrator, she purposely tries to go in where all the Democrat locations are just to avoid additional costs. That way we're splitting the costs. But is that even impacted by what we're trying to accomplish? Shouldn't all the primary administrators be trying to do their own thing separately from the Democrats anyways?
I think the best way to look at this kind of from a simple way is right now we have, in essence, we sort of have closed primaries the moment you walk up to the desk to pick out which ballot you want to vote, right? You have to pick one or the other, the red or the blue ballot, right? And once you pick the red ballot, you can't vote for anybody on the blue ballot and vice versa. So we have, like Pennsylvania has that system where you can literally change your affiliation when you walk up to the desk to pick up your ballot. So it's not really a closed primary. This would be another check for the election judge. When you walk up and say, hi, I'd like to vote, they say, let me see your ID. They look you up in the computer, and there's a R by your name on your voter registration. They say, here's your ballot. You don't get to choose one. They say, here's your ballot. If you go up and there's a D, they say, here's your ballot. If you go up and neither one is there, you go, you can't vote. This is a primary election. Please come back in November for the general when you're allowed to vote. So it isn't really, it's not going to be as big a sea change as I've probably unintentionally made it out to be here in this talk today. It's really just a question of, do you get to pick which ballot you pick up off the table, or does the election judge tell you which ballot you get to pick up off the table?
So on that, we were specifically asking, do you want a Republican or a Democrat ballot? If they said Democrat, I'm sorry, you need to go over to that side of the room.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is that now we don't even have to do that. We can just either print a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot and hand it out.
You give them your ID or your voter registration card, and they hand you a ballot. It can coincide with your registration.
So then do we need to address any of that procedure in this for the county parties to be able to buy into it? Because like, not the county parties, but like the county elections administrators, because I can see where they would kind of balk at some of this because they're like, oh, how do we legislatively figure that out? But what you just said simplifies the process to where now, during early vote, we get to control all of the Governor 1 precincts. They get to control their Governor 1 precincts. I know in Denton County, we dominate, so
right.
That works out in our favor. So I mean, should we address any of that just so that we can get county buy-in?
Not in this rule. I mean, you might address that with Secretary of State at some point. I mean, you don't get buy-in now trying to get something you don't already have. I'm not really trying to rebuild the whole system. So I guess I don't know the answer to your question because I don't really understand it.
No, that was what I was looking for.
Jim, Mike Snyder, SD9. We have been talking for the past 2 years how to enforce Rule 44 and how we get our Republicans to act like Republicans, how we end the faceless or the faithless legislature that doesn't adhere to our morals and more importantly, our legislative priorities,
our
right?
platform, yeah.
This seems like one of the best ways. We complain that we don't have teeth in 44 to make it stick. This, to me, seems like it would be the teeth to make it stick because they know we know who they are, and if they do not represent us, they know we're coming for them in the next election cycle.
Right. Yeah, you don't know this, but when I proposed this rule to the SREC at first, it also had a Rule 47. And Rule 47 was ballot access, where a politician decides they're going to run for office. You know how they run you know how they get an R by their name now? They file their application with the Republican county chair and pay their filing fee. If Nancy Pelosi comes and runs for Collin County Commissioner against Susan Fletcher, and she wants to run as a Republican, all she's got to do is go up to the county chair, Collin County, pay her money, and give her the application, and she gets an R by her name. Okay, time out. That's not letting us pick who our horses are, okay? The problem with that is that will end up in 50 lawsuits. Because the first time somebody comes up, and Nancy Pelosi comes up and hands her application, and they say, no, I'm not going to put you on the ballot, that's going to generate a lawsuit. So this is a way, you're right, this is a way of sort of eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? We got to get our electorate lined up first. Then we can get our candidates lined up. And if they don't come on board automatically, like I think you are suggesting they will, then maybe 2 years from now we come back and we have a Rule 47. And we figure out that we can figure out a way. It was naively written, so the SREC turned it down and they needed to. Because it was just kind of a stream of consciousness out of my head. But we need to kind of have a way we can get rid of unfaithful legislators too. I think you're right, and I think this goes a long ways to doing that.
But we don't need to put that in this rule because that would garbage it up to a point that we would.
We don't want to put anything else in this rule. Like I say, take stuff out if you want to, but I wouldn't add anything else into it, unless some words may need to be changed or something. Yes, sir.
Jim, it says here one of the qualifications is to vote in a Republican primary that you have to have voted in the previous biennium. Now, what if somebody voted Democrat and then it gets to be a couple years later and they decide, well, I think I want to start voting Republican. What's the segue to get into the Republican?
Oath of affiliation. It's or, 1 or 2 or 3. So either any of those 3 will qualify you to vote as a Republican. So if you've been a lifelong Democrat, Mr. Pelosi, and you want to finally see the light and come vote as a Republican, there's an avenue for you to do that. Just fill out an oath of affiliation and get to be a Republican. Yes, ma'am.
Brooks Coleman, SD 29. When you were talking about the election judge selecting the ballot, because there's an R behind their name. Well, I work as an election judge, so
Me too.
It sounds like, it seems like if they're registered Republican, you actually, as a judge, wouldn't be selecting it.
No.
The system would be.
That's right.
Because you put in the activation card, it prints out.
Because you asked to vote as a Republican. He's just doing what he wants you to do.
No, but I mean, once they give you the ID,
Right.
you plug it in and it's going to only print out.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I don't mean he selected you, like looked you over and decided whether you were
No,
Republican
no,
or
but I
Democrat.
meant but technically, legally, you would not be selecting it. They had selected it because they had registered.
The voter selects,
Right.
self-selects.
The
to be
voter had
Republican.
selected it by registering Republican.
All the election judges just handed you the paperwork you've asked for.
Thank you.
Jim.
Yes, sir.
Eric Opielis, SD 14. So I'm a little confused here. What happens when someone registers to vote on February 1st? Are they not able to vote in the Republican primary that year?
Give me some other dates that tie to your February 1st.
The March primary is, say, March 5th?
No, they wouldn't be able to vote then. They would be able to vote in the next race, but unless they do it by the deadline to affiliate as a Republican, they do not get a vote in that election cycle as a Republican.
So why would they not have a constitutional claim for not being allowed to vote in that primary?
That's a great question, and that's why I said earlier, it's not an election. It's a selection. It has the trappings of an election. It's not an election. You're not electing any officials in a primary. You're just picking your candidate. They don't have a constitutional right to pick a candidate.
Has anyone ever successfully made that argument in court?
Yes. Just now. No.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in the Fifth Circuit in the en banc courtroom. You guys are just like grilling me, which is great. It's fun. Yeah. No, they just don't get to vote. It's just, again, elk hunting. If you don't sign up for the lottery by November 1st, you don't get to elk hunt that year.
Do you think that Jim Ho on the Fifth Circuit would agree with you?
100%.
Okay.
He's a constitutional scholar. He would agree with me. Leslie.
Leslie Thomas, SD 22. The reason that date is there is because there was discussion about Democrats gaming the Republican primary. So they wanted to not let anyone know who the Republican, who was running in the Republican primary so that they could join in based on who was running. So they put that date there. So you would have to sign up before you knew who was running, so we would have less issues. But you can take it out if you want. I've always been for open primaries because I'm Irish. I like the rumble, and but you have to work it, right? Open primaries work if you work it. It's a different type of work.
Right.
If we close the primaries, you're going to have to work it in South Texas. You're going to have to be proactive. You're going to have to be knocking doors. You're going to have registration drives. You're going to have to be going and meeting people and talking and inviting them into the party, which is, I think it's better to have a personal invitation into the party rather than just showing up to vote, and that's impersonal. So I am now for closed primaries because that's just the way the world's going, and so yeah, that's why we put that language in there. I mean, y'all can move it around, y'all can take it out. It will at some point. Someone's going to have to decide when the cutoff date is.
Right.
There's got to be a line, right? We learned that in law school. There's a line somewhere.
And any line is arbitrary. None of them have any special claim to being the date. It's just whatever we feel like is sufficient for the purpose. Yes, sir.
Jim Randy Dunning, SD2.
You're the last one. I think I've talked to everybody in the whole committee now.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so the objections I've heard so far are things like, we don't have enough money, it's going to cause a conflict, what can a bunch of people sitting around in a room signing a piece of paper do? Well, I seem to remember a time when a bunch of guys sat around with signing a piece of paper. They didn't have enough money, they didn't have... Power was not really on their sides, but they ended up changing the world anyway. So I'm impressed by this move. I like it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you guys are doing yourselves a favor with it. Yes, sir.
Dwayne Wright, SD5. So we said that the primary is a selection and not an election. However, our precinct chairs and county chairs are elected in the primary. So are we going to try to segregate that out? Or, because people wouldn't be able to weigh in on that, and is an actual...
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that, because you're right, they're different. They're elected at different times, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
But wouldn't there be an argument that only Republicans should elect precinct chairs in the first place in the Republican Party, so it kind of takes care of that problem?
Yeah, so we take the date of affiliation back before the precinct chairs sign up, right? Move it to August, if their election's in September. But that, you're right, the precinct chair, that is an election at the same time as the primary selection. That's right.
So, Jim, I've tried probably more election contests than anyone in this room. How are you going to force people to follow this? And how are you going to ensure consistent application of this? Because I see just a potential for a morass where you're going to have early voting. You can't force the county elections administrator to follow this rule.
No.
They conduct under the primary system that we have. We kind of have to pick or choose which one you're going to do. Either you're going to do it yourself, or you're going to rely on the machinery of the state, which is going to follow state law. And so,
unless state law gets struck down.
Well, what are you going to do to ensure that all of the election judges follow this, or that the elections administrator doesn't give ballots?
Same thing I do now. I expect them to follow the law, and if they don't, they get written up for it. It's crime.
And what court would enforce this rule over state law?
A federal district judge will strike the election code. Now it's gone. There's a big hole in our law. This legislature or this rule can fill it back in. Legislature using this rule can fill it back in. Or, alternatively, you know this because you do election litigation, federal judge can issue a declaratory judgment and an injunction to require the Secretary of State to follow his edicts and his order about what's going to happen. And he can do that, and the U.S. Marshals and the United States Army will enforce it if she doesn't do it.
So the Colorado Republican Party tried to push itself back to a closed primary. They had a closed primary system. The state passed a law that opened the primary, and in February of this year, they sought an injunction in federal district court, and the federal district court declined, not just once but twice in two separate cases, to grant that injunction. How are you so confident that that will happen?
The exact opposite has happened in Wisconsin and New Jersey. The exact opposite. They tried to close their primaries and the judge struck it and said, or they tried to open their primaries and the judge struck it and said, party gets to decide and they want closed primaries.
So the only case I know of where you had an open primary, like we have here in Texas, really we have a semi-open primary, you described that earlier.
Right.
Was your Idaho case.
I can't say that name, yeah.
So, and in that case, they had a different law than we have here in Texas. They had everybody on the same ballot, and they had one set of officials that it was not conducted by each party, kind of like what we have here.
Right.
Do you know of a case directly on point where that has occurred?
No, not directly on point. All cases are by analogy because every case has a little bit different facts and a little bit different law. But I'm confident that the First Amendment freedom of association jurisprudence is robust enough and long-standing enough where these cases were basically a done deal before they were ever filed, just like ours will be.
So, and I can probably get into this in a little bit because I think the history of this is quite interesting. Are you familiar with the Texas Democratic Party's rules back in the 1920s and 30s that were struck down by the Supreme Court restricting participation of adherents to another political party, in particular Republicans, from participating in their primary?
No.
Okay.
You can cite it to me. I'd like to read it.
I will. I'll get into that once we get into argument.
I have a particular question. David Westbrook, SD19.
Not fast enough.
Are 2 and 3 not kind of repetitive? The individual is registered as a Republican with the party, but then there's also the individual completes and submits a written certificate of affiliation with the party. So,
well, number one,
same thing, isn't it?
Number one is you vote as a Republican. Number two is you register as a Republican. Number three, you file an oath of affiliation.
Which is registering as a Republican.
But,
right?
but it's not, you're registering as a Republican. Number two is when you
I mean, we were looking for ways to reduce the number of the word count. It feels like that's the place to do it if we're going to reduce the word count. Just strike 2 and just go with
or strike 3.
Or
no,
strike
you'd have
3,
to have
I mean,
how you get registered. So I guess you'd strike 2.
But a certificate of affiliation seems to be the one that's
well,
currently in use.
But
and
you don't
people are
use a
familiar with.
certificate of affiliation when every year they send you a new voter registration. That's what number 2 is meant to do. They send you a voter registration form application. You fill it out. You send it in. Now you're registered.
Except that there's no way to register as a Republican right now.
Correct, but there will be if this, if this prevails. We'll have.
But there's not right now.
Right. This is forward-looking.
I think SD17 had a question. He's been waiting a while.
So, Jim, is the party going to mail these out? Because it says the Republican Party of Texas is the one that you're registered with, and they're going to prescribe a certificate of affiliation form, and you're going to have to fill that out and send it, download it from the party's website. How are you going to notify?
That's the other thing. If you talk about cost and expense, if we're going to start a whole new election process where we're going to own the database and own the voter rolls, and send everything out and maintain it all, like the Secretary of State is doing now with tax money, right, and candidate filing fees, that's really going to be expensive. But if we use what's there now and just make the Secretary of State put an R and a D on your registration form, and you can only vote an R or D accordingly, then all that machinery is still in place. Or what's going to keep the Secretary of State from violating the law? Well, whatever always keeps everybody from not violating the law. They don't want to go to jail, get fined.
So since this is a party registration form, is there any penalty for falsifying that information under the law? No. So I could go and fill out 19 million of these cards for Beto O'Rourke, et cetera, and register these people with the party, and we wouldn't have any ability to stop that.
No, even if you don't do it, if 19 of them do it, they can register as a Republican if they want to. We're not stopping people from registering as a Republican, right? Rachel?
Mr. Chair, point of order, what is our current procedure right now?
We're simply in Q&A of Mr. Pickle.
And when will we go to debate?
Under what authority in our procedures that we adopted?
voted to extend.
Yeah, well, we voted to extend the 30 minutes, but maybe you didn't hear, but I simply asked, was there any objection, Mr. Pickle coming up and explaining the SREC Rule 36 and helping out with the questions that the members would have?
I'm just wondering how long we're going to go.
Yeah.
Are we in debate? Can we begin debating on this, or
Yeah,
does everyone
unless
ask
somebody
all the
has-
questions they want?
One more question.
Burning questions.
We have a motion on the floor. I thought that actually up until just the last 5 minutes, we've been pretty efficient at covering a lot of ground with most of the members' questions. Maybe we could wrap that up in the next few minutes. We've still got about another 4 or 5 minutes on the extension. So
This is the
at that
17th.
point, maybe we ought to kind of wrap it up. But Jim, if you could stick around to
I will,
address
yeah.
any kind of other things that come up. And there were a couple of guys over here, I think, that had their hand up.
SD 17, Caleb.
Hey,
I just want
y'all need to quit jumping in line in front of me. Three of y'all already jumped in, so I'm going to take the.
I've been
Sir?
raising my hand.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I just
Sorry.
want to hear any objections that were brought up by SREC members during the deliberations and how this one came about.
Yeah, we definitely debated this. We talked about it. This is a joint effort by everybody on the SREC Rules Committee. The SREC itself, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, pretty much just adopted this unanimously without a lot of discussion.
As far as objections, there were.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was unanimous vote. Yeah. Last question.
Okay, first I want to apologize for him. I didn't know he had been waiting for so long. So the third way to qualify here, it says the individual completes and submits a written certificate of affiliation with the Republican Party of Texas no later than the first day on which a candidate may file a place on a general primary election ballot. So my question, I guess I have for you, Jim, is why did you choose that date, the first day? Because it seems like if you waited till the last day, somebody could say, hey, I want to vote for that guy. He's a Republican. I didn't know he was going to vote that way, and he maybe would change his mind. So is that like set in stone?
Well, I had it 60 days before the first day for a candidate to file, and the SREC Rules Committee decided to put it right upon the deadline. So I still think there should be a buffer there. Not after that date, but before that date. You're asking if we should put the date after that.
Well, the deadline for registering to run on the ballot.
Right.
So they could see, hey, there's the guy's a Republican. I want to vote for that guy. Maybe we could get somebody to switch.
You know, that's kind of arguing to the outlier. I think that's going to happen pretty rarely.
Well,
Okay, you could get some Democrats that must switch.
I want all the Democrats to switch.
to me, this is really important. I'm going to ask as many questions as I can about this, and hopefully it benefits everybody.
Yeah. How much time you got,
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman, could we return to members being recognized by the chair before speaking?
We can do that. It'll probably slow things down a bit. Y'all have been doing this actually pretty well, but if y'all would prefer we do that, yeah, that's fine. I can, no problem.
I think I pretty much answered almost all the questions I think I can, some of them a couple of times. So I'll stick around afterwards if anybody wants to talk to me.
Mr. Chairman.
But I'd like you guys to, do the jobs you were sent here to do.
Yeah, Eric?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, thank you for the discussion, Jim.
Yes, sir.
I'm not asking a question. I'm moving to debate because I think we've gotten all of our questions answered. Yeah. I support the idea of a closed primary. What I don't support is the idea of doing this outside of the law. We are the party of the rule of law. I think we've always espoused that tradition in the Republican Party as opposed to the Democratic Party. I'm real troubled by this private club theory, and I've done a lot of research in the law with regards to this. It hasn't ever been the law of the land. With regard to the conduct of a political party that's been entrusted with the legislature with the power to nominate candidates for office in a general election. This is not at all a slam dunk. As Mr. Pickle admitted, there isn't a direct case on point, not much less 9. The only one close to this is the Idaho case, which was Idaho Republican Party versus Asura back in 2011. But as I stated earlier, Idaho's not like the semi-open primary system we have here in Texas. Here, we have a Republican and a Democratic primary that is conducted by officers of each party. Fundamentally, the U.S. Constitution puts in the hands of the legislature, not the political parties, the ability to describe how elections are conducted. I know you're getting around that by saying it's a selection, not an election, but I'm not so certain that a
It's
court
subject
would
to the First
disagree.
Amendment.
So,
That's the issue.
Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution states very plainly, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as the places of choosing senators. The Texas Constitution has a very similar clause, what we call the Free Suffrage Clause. In Article 6, Section 2A, it says, notwithstanding any other provision of this Constitution, the legislature, keep in mind, the legislature may enact laws and provide a method of registration, including the time of such registration, permitting any person who is qualified to vote in this state, except for the residence requirements within a county or district as set forth in Section 2 of this article, to vote for electors for President and Vice President of the United States, and all offices, questions, or propositions to be voted on by all voters throughout the state. We have a fundamental bar to a restriction against letting a certain class of people not participate in an election by our state constitution. The federal constitution has a similar bar against us doing this on our own. It began back in 1920. The Texas Supreme Court in Coy versus Snyder held that the legislature could extend the privilege of voting in party primaries to women over the objection of the Texas Democratic Party, which prohibited it at that point. In 1926, this was reaffirmed in Briscoe versus Boyle. And I'll cite it because I was asked that earlier. 286 Southwest 2nd, 275, where the court overturned a Democratic Party rule that prohibited the participation of persons who endorsed Republican Party's nominees in a general election. This case involved Dolph Briscoe. You might recognize the name. He was a Democrat who supported the Republican nominee for president, and the party rule purported to prevent him from being able to participate in the next election after he did that. The court struck it down, saying, before the legislative department invaded the province of party government and assumed control and regulation of party machinery, the right to say who should and who should not participate in party affairs was exercised by the party governments, with which the courts would not concern themselves. But the legislature has taken possession and control of the machinery of the political parties of the state. And while it permits the parties to operate that machinery, they do so only in somewhat strict accordance with the rules and regulations laid down in minute and cumbersome detail by the legislative body. The statute designates the official positions to be occupied by the parties, and while it permits the members of the parties to select such officials, they can only do so in the manner prescribed by the statutes, which define the powers and duties of those officials, beyond which they cannot lawfully act. The statute prescribes the time, place, and manner of holding primary elections. It prescribes the forms of the ballots to be used, and the process by which the election officials shall identify and hand out the ballots, and by which the voter shall mark and deposit the ballots when voted. It prescribes the declaration to be made by the voter, and the obligation to be assumed by him as a condition precedent to the validity of the ballot. In fine, the legislature has in minute detail laid out the process by which political parties shall operate the statute-made machinery for making party nominations, and has so hedged this machinery with statutory regulations and restrictions so as to deprive the parties and their managers of all discretion in the manipulation of that machinery. It follows that party managers, executive committees, or election judges can exact of prospective voters no other test, declaration, or pledge than that prescribed by law, which is an express declaration of the voter that he's a member of the party holding the election and will support the nominees of that election. As a practical matter, the declarations and promise add but little obligation to the voter and should be...
Does a 3-minute rule apply here?
No, it does not, but time has expired on our second extension. Would the committee want to have a third extension?
I thought we were in debate.
We're in debate, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, and I'll move that we extend it, because I think this is important for people to understand that.
Well, you're not the only one in the room, though, Eric.
Okay, I'll move that.
Wait. So what is the current motion that we're seconding and now debating? Extending for 30 minutes. Is that clear to everyone? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay? Nay. I think the ayes have it. So, okay, back to Eric, but I would ask that you wrap it up pretty quick.
Absolutely. It's very important to look at the history of this in the context of Texas. The U.S. Supreme Court followed in Nixon versus Condon, 286 U.S. 73, when the Democratic Party attempted to restrict the participation of their party by primary rule. Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, made clear that was not permitted because they were exercising the authority of the state. So the proponents that the U.S. and Texas constitutions can be violated by our party choose cases dealing with California law, which is, of course, a dangerous proposition because California does things not exactly like the rest of the world. Both of the cases that have been cited in some of the discussion that's been had, both you and the Jones case, deal with a totally different system, this jungle-type primary that the party leaders have in California. We're not dealing with that. They also talk specifically about dealing with an endorsement of a party. This is not an endorsement. This is selecting a nominee for a general election for public office. We are very much free to endorse whoever we want. In fact, right now, we are endorsing people in our primary with regards to Rule 44. And so it's just totally apples and oranges to what the cases that have been cited, both the Burdick and Takashi case and so on. The U.S. Supreme Court has set forth a test for determining whether or not it is an infringement on the freedom of association. It's called the Allison-Burdick test. And I won't get into the details of it because y'all are stressed for time, but I encourage you to look up that. It talks about the severity of the burden that a primary system imposes upon associational rights of a party. And the court held that this works both ways. And it was most recently in this Colorado case that I just cited, where the court held that...
Hang on just a second.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll go to Rachel next, but you don't have to keep holding your hand up is all.
Yeah. So it says specifically, a political party does not have a constitutional right to nominate its candidates by a certain method. The Fourth Circuit also held in Miller versus Brown in 2007 that a private organization, if you're trying to run your own system, does not have the ability to co-opt the machinery of the state in contravention of state law. Contrary to what I think has been argued here today, there is no obligation of the state to fund a private organization. There is no ability of the party to force an election administrator to violate state law. Mail-in balloting in a primary election is conducted by counties as well as in-person voting. And there's going to be a lot of different choices made by people creating the ability for election contests. It's not at all certain that there will be a law struck down by a federal district judge in this case, or even upheld by the Fifth Circuit if it is struck down. State courts are obligated to follow Texas law, not party rules, which are unenforceable in the courts when they're not consistent with state law, because our rules must be consistent with state law under the election code. So I want to close real quick with a statement made in Utah Republican Party versus Cox. This was decided by the 10th Circuit in a similar type of situation in 2018. I made a very important point, that it's the voters in a primary election, not the party leadership, who are the best barometer of a party's values. The associational rights of a political party expand beyond the party leadership and would be toothless if party bosses could dictate how candidates can qualify for the primary ballot, perhaps, for example, by requiring candidates to win the support of party bosses in order to qualify for the primary ballot, leading to primary, and they use the air quote, elections with a single candidate on the ballot. I think it's not at all certain that the party would win the case that's being set up by this, especially due to some of the infirmities that we have in this rule. Like, excluding people who newly registered to vote in the period between the filing period and 30 days before the election. Our state constitution says you can register to vote 30 days before an election in any election held in the state. If you move into the state, you would be excluded from voting in the Republican primary, even if you were a Republican in another state. If you turned 18 and you were a member of the Teenage Republicans and you wanted to participate, you would be excluded from voting in our party's primary if you turned 18 from the period beginning at the filing period to 30 days before the primary election. You'd have to wait a whole nother 2 years to exercise your ability to support candidates that you might even be campaigning for and donating to as a young new voter. So I think there's a lot of challenges to how this is set up that would fail in many different regards before we even get to the issue of free speech, freedom of association. We need to close our primary in order to protect the sanctity of our ballot. But we need to do that in a way that is actually able to be upheld by the courts. And the way you do that is to work with the legislature in doing that. We have a primary where we had 70%, 80% of the voters that said that they support that. We have a lieutenant governor that said he supports that. We have multiple new members of the House that say they support it. All of our candidates for party chairs say they support it. I think we should allow the process to work its way out so that we can do this in a way that allows us actually to put this in place rather than just kind of throw this out there. Thank you.
Rachel?
Rachel Hooper, SD 13. It is 2024, and we are in the state of Texas. This year, Republican primary voters at 72.74% said they want closed primaries. Nikki Haley openly campaigned on the fact that we have open primaries in Texas. In House District 21, 2,974 Democrats voted in that primary election. And in fact, would there be a runoff in that race but for the Democrats voting in that primary election? What is going on in the Texas legislature? Well, in the 88th session, House Bill 1635 was filed and passed out of the Elections Committee. What did it do? Well, it was used to regulate what we do in our party. So said differently, some people got together and supported a bill that removed the authority of political parties to determine ballots. That was this past session. You may remember Memorial Day weekend in the 87th legislature, House Bill 1987, where the legislature said, conference committee came out and they wanted to try to regulate what we do. They wanted to put the state chair on the primary ballot. They wanted to put the SRECs on the primary ballot. Enough. I've had it, and we need to be in control of our own party. We need to determine and set the rules that we want in place. And that is what we are doing here. I don't care what happened in 1900 whatever. It is 2024. And we're here to do a job. We're here to do what the Republican primary voters begged us to do.
Kathy and Leslie.
Senate District 21, Kathy Hagler. Yes, it is 2024, and in our March 5th primary, Prop 9 was the one that was about the closed primary. First of all, it was not explained in the proposition that it would not go through the legislature and that it could cost us millions of dollars. It won by less than 3/4 of the voters who voted in it, 72.74%. You know, if you make that in school, that's a D or F, depending on whatever your grading system is. Out of all 13 propositions, number 9 got the lowest percentage of all of the 13 propositions. All of them got more positive votes than number 9. It was number 10 out of the 13 of people who even bothered to vote in it. A bunch of people just skipped it. And I just want to repeat to emphasize, even though it was the lowest one and that got the lowest percentage, they didn't understand that we were saying we're going to do it by party rule, not going through the legislature. That wasn't explained.
Leslie?
Leslie Thomas, SD 22. To clarify, just get rid of the date up there where you have to register, if that's going to be an issue. We'll just delete that. And that's an easy thing. I think we all agree with that. For the person that's turning 18 years old, we already offer that you can pre-register before you turn 18 so that when you turn 18, you're ready to vote. And I'd like to cite the U case, UV San Francisco City, Democratic. It was in like 1988, 89, and it supersedes, it came before the Idaho case. Now, I'm an attorney, but I'm not a fancy one. I do special ed law and wills and election integrity, but I'm not the smart election integrity one. Eric is that one. So anyway, I'm just telling you who I am. What the U case said, and it was about the Democrats, what the U case, EU, says is that the only thing that the government has to govern in an election is make sure that they're free and fair. Free and fair. Everything else is left up to the First Amendment right of associations to the members in the party. And if you want to see, you just Google EU versus SF, San Francisco City. So, and that's in 1988, 89 one. And so that's the one that they relied on in Idaho. So it was held that the challenged California election laws were invalid since they burdened the First Amendment rights of the political parties and their members without serving a compelling state interest. A compelling state interest is also a test. So you look at that test, and the compelling state interest would overrule the laws. So what I want to stress is we are in the Constitution, the First Amendment. We are that important. We have the freedom of association. Elections are in the Constitution. It's in the Texas Constitution, and that's, they set things up that it's the United States Constitution where it's free and fair. So ask yourself, does this govern the election where it's keeping it free and where it's keeping it fair? And where it is, it's under the government's purview. But where it's not under the government's purview, it's under our purview, under the First Amendment. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, Ronnie? Then I'll come back to Randy and Kristen.
Unfortunately, I won't be as eloquent as some of the others, but we are in the homeland of the Alamo, where the legend has it, William B. Travis drew a line in the sand. This is our line in the sand for the Texas legislature. This is where we tell them our rule of what we want. It's time as Republicans that we stop hiding behind the wording of the law, the rule of the law. Let's officially claim the spirit of the law and tell the legislator what we want. Because obviously they're not listening to the voters, so now it's time for them to listen to the party.
Randy Dunning, SD2. Okay, I've heard that that this measure, when the ballot measure 9 got 72%, that makes it a C. Of course, last time I looked, that's only in academia, and I don't care what academia thinks. What I notice is that in the electoral world, 72% has another name. It's called a landslide. Now, what we're proposing to do here is perhaps a little risky, but, you know, I keep looking at the things that have changed the world, and every last thing that changed the world was a little bit risky to do. There's always objections. There's always potential cost. There's always ruin. When you're doing things that are big, when you're doing things that are important, you're putting big and important things on the line. And in this case, I think we're in good standing. I think some of these cases we hear about the 1920s, I'd like to know a lot more details about them. Were these parties trying to keep certain groups of people from voting, or was it people just trying to ensure that the people that voted in their primary belonged to their party, regardless of what race, color, whatever they had? So therefore, I think this is a perfectly good thing to do. I think this is what we're going to have to do to push the legislature off the dime. I've watched numerous court cases in the last few years as the Supreme Court and the federal courts have taken things which long ago were thought well settled, only to find out that they were settled wrong back then, and they're getting fixed right now. The whole corpus of Second Amendment law in the last 12 to 15 years has been a classic example of that. So I think those court cases are, in my opinion, wrong. And so the only way we can fix them is we have to stand up, bare our chest, and do what needs to be done. And I think it's passed this rule into our corpus of rules.
Kristen, and then Justin, and then Matt.
Kristen Bentley, SD1. I am in favor of moving forward with this and debating additional language. The bottom line is that we have the right to affiliate. We have the right to affiliate as Republicans and nominate a real Republican for the general election. In HD1 right now, we have a candidate in a runoff who is placating to Democrats in order to get them to vote for him. We have had enough. As someone else said, enough is enough. And you can cite cases from a long time ago and go into great detail about them with us still not understanding the merits of that exact case. What's being told to us by many attorneys who have advised is that we need to make a rule that creates a justiciable action. We need to make sure that it's simple, that a rule becomes incongruent with the current law when it comes to affiliation, and that there are other states that have done that and have been successful. And so why shouldn't we try it? We're definitely not going to get our legislature to pass this unless we do this first. It's one of our only paths, or it's our only path that I think we can actually see success. And so, you know, I know also, I'll say this, that it is one of the things that in Senate District 1, we have 19 counties in Northeast Texas, and it is one of the most important things to my constituents there. I hear it time and time again that we must close the primary, and we need to do everything we can to at least try to close the primary.
Thank you. Justin was next, and then Mac, I believe.
Thank you. And that's Justin Nichols, SD26, and I appreciate all of my colleagues' analysis on this. But and I'm going to end with a motion to amend that I think I've emailed. I don't know if that's been received by the secretary. It was sent to Jerry.Fisher. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. All right. So.
Point of order. Have we even brought up the rules to make amendments?
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded.
It was put into motion by Ray.
The 46 or all of the rules?
No, 46.
Just this 46?
Oh,
So
it's 46.
So this is what I'm going to move to amend, that the language in green be added, that the language in red be stricken, and probably the most controversial will be the last part. And what that does, the last part, is require that this basically is a trigger provision so that the rule is automatically implemented upon the legislature's repeal of the statutes that are in conflict with this rule or expressly authorize it. Mr. Pickle, for whom I have a great deal of respect and enjoyed watching him handle everyone's questions so gracefully, indicated that the passage of this rule will create some sort of shotgun for the legislature to act. And I assume that legislative priorities is going to be loading that shotgun up as well. But I believe that there is some purpose in encouraging and requiring legislative action. Every lawyer in this room will tell you, if answering truthfully, you do not know with absolute certainty the way in which a litigation will go. Not only if you are bringing it, but also you do not know the defensive ways in which litigation can be used from your opponents to foil your plan. If anyone believes that we pass this weekend, sue in a month, and this is all resolved before November, certainly not the next primary, I really believe that you're probably fooling yourselves. When considering injunctions, courts typically maintain the status quo. They do not allow broad changes to go into effect until the merits are reviewed, typically. But before that, if this rule, in fact, will inspire the legislature to act, there will be time to do it next year, and there will be time to implement it. So my amendment deals with two things. One, you actually have to have a process for registering it, and just saying register without authorizing language to let the SREC set forth that process makes this susceptible to challenge. Before you get to a First Amendment challenge, I think that has to be fixed. Secondly, I think Eric's point was correct, that you disenfranchise, you rise to a Texas state constitutional challenge when you make the ability to vote shorter than the state constitutional guaranteed window to be eligible to vote in an election. And that election could be as significant or insignificant as you determine it, as a county chair or precinct chair. And then third, and I know that there will be some, I do believe that you cannot by rule say this law supersedes the law of the state. I think that is really fun language for a court to say you can't do that. I don't know why that language needs to be there, particularly if we are admitting that laws regarding residency requirements do apply. That is not what this language says in my view. So that's the basis for that restriction. And then finally, and I know that good minds and good people may disagree on this issue, but I think process matters. Setting up a fight for the sake of doing it does not always result in a great win. And remember, I say this when people use the line in the sand, the people who did so were not the ones who prevailed that day. Later, the battle was won, but the people who drew the line in the sand that day were not the ones who ended up prevailing. So I think this is something we can go about with deliberation, good minds. There is no question that this body is of the mind that our primaries need to be closed. We are talking about the path in which to get there, and I hope everyone will keep that in mind as we debate these. But Mr. Chairman, this is my motion to amend.
Second.
This is a very compound motion. We don't typically do that. Do I hear perhaps a motion to divide this into its different
I move to divide the motion into each separate section.
Second.
Ronnie Jones.
Wait, hang on a second. Okay, so are you addressing the amendment to divide this into separate sections?
Right.
No, I was going to speak against the motion.
Well, hang on that. We're on the motion to divide the question at this point.
I understand, but Mr. Pickle made it clear that the more holes we put in it, the more vulnerable it's going to be. And I would like to just go ahead and vote on this, and I would like to see an up or down vote, because this has been looked at by the Rules Committee at the RPT. It's been looked at by the Executive Committee.
So you would be against dividing the question and just voting it down?
Yes.
Okay. Kathy?
Was there a second?
Yes, there was. Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is the motion on the floor to divide?
It's to divide the question at this point, yes.
I would like to speak against that as well, if that's appropriate at this time, since we've already had one against.
Yes.
I think the lines are pretty clearly drawn here. I think there is a group that believes this is an action, that the time has come to take that action. We don't believe the legislature is going to act. We don't have any reason to believe that at this point. So, and I think just looking at these rules, I mean, this amendment, it looks to me like it pretty much guts what the intent is. So I would oppose the motion to divide.
Which side of this?
In
You're
favor.
against, you're for the motion to divide?
Oh, not to divide.
Kristen, what side were you on? Motion to divide. Are you for the motion to divide or against it?
Well, I'm against, no, I'm for the motion to divide.
Okay.
I think that Jim's point was very well taken about not adding language. But I do think that there's room for improvement, and there's room to remove language. And so I want to make sure that we continue to debate it, is I think what yeah.
Okay. Any further, we're almost out of time for this segment. The vote on the floor is to divide the question. If we vote that down, then we would go back to the full compound amendment.
Right.
And at that point, we could vote that up or down, and that would take us back to the Rule 46 language from the SREC. Okay? Does everybody understand? So right now, we're voting to divide the question. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no.
No.
The noes have it. Okay, so that takes us back to Justin's full amendment. Yes, Wayne.
I want to speak for the amendment.
Okay.
Part of what we're here for is to contemplate the pros and cons of our actions. And in that way, at least we can come out of here saying that we've done our due diligence. And I know people are very emotional about this, and the approach in the process does matter heavily. I don't know if everybody's aware, but the actual makeup of our legislator, I would guarantee, with way more certainty than whether we're going to get sued or not, that will be different on the 28th of this month. I've been in the trenches. We've been fighting for this. We've got major changes that have happened. And the body of the legislature come the next session is completely going to be different than what has been in the past. For sure. That's a certainty. Okay? So with that being said, I don't know that this is the time we jump off of a cliff and do something based on a supposition of what a court will do. I mean, I've been party to a denial of access, ballot access suit in San Jacinto County. So I know what that entails. I don't know how many people have actually been involved with that, but it's very easy for someone to file a suit when you don't allow them to have access on the ballot. So that's why, I want closed primaries, but the method and the way we do it is very, very important. And I just feel like we should lean in on the new 20 reps that we're going to have on the 28th.
Okay, anybody wanting to speak against the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, Chuck Burnett, SD 20. I move to amend by removing the entire last paragraph in green.
Second.
You want to amend Justin's amendment by striking the green paragraph?
Yes, sir. That last paragraph in green in totality.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Yeah, there was a second.
Sorry?
He's not dividing.
It's an amendment to the amendment. Did we get a second?
Yes.
Second, or Leslie did.
We're out of time at this point. Is there any further debate? Seeing none, we've got an amendment on the amendment, which would strike the last paragraph. All in favor of doing the amendment to the amendment, say aye.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Point of information. Can you just clarify what exactly we're voting to do right now?
Yes, it did. Oh, and I believe you wanted to speak to it briefly. Sorry about that. It's late. I agree. It would be striking that last paragraph only, but if the vote failed, it would go back to all of Justin's original language. Okay. Does that answer your inquiry?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Chuck?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remind the committee of Rachel's language. She went over this very clearly in Jim's purpose, in which he had a big part in this, is the Texas legislature has not been acting and probably will not act. And this kind of puts them in the driver's seat again, which was not the intent of this. So I just ask everybody to please remove this last part. Thank you.
Okay. Ready for the vote? Yes. All in favor of striking that paragraph, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. That brings us back to what's left of the original Justin amendment.
Stop saying that. God, stop saying it.
I didn't mean that to.
God, which I wrote while drunk at a bar, so I could go home early.
Can we get it on the screen where we can see?
Mr. Chairman.
That's not what happened. Alt Shift 5. Just delete it. Just hit delete.
Shane's been a real trooper in all this, y'all.
Just hit delete. Just hit delete. Backspace. 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 No, just backspace. Just cut. Whoa.
Place with white space. There's all kinds of ways to.
Just delete it.
The two other green sections and the red section. That's all. Well, that's three changes. Okay. Yes, Eric.
So, having litigated cases like this before, all the way to the Supreme Court, with regard to redistricting, in 2012, the courts are not just merely going to strike down the statute. What the courts will do is they will decline to interfere in the legislative branch's duties because they want to abstain from becoming a legislature. And they will give the legislature an opportunity to amend a statute to conform to any constitutional infirmities that they find with that statute. One of the things that a court will look to also with regard to compliance with the Constitution, with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, the Voting Rights Act, for instance, is an effort to address issues that would prevent a class of people from voting. We talked about that with regards to people who register to vote, who become 18, who move into the state, and so on. Failure to address those issues when raised will cause a court to act against changing the law in favor of whatever the plaintiff is wanting. So I think it's important that we pass this to address the issues that are very clear on its face in violation of the constitutional rights of the voters of the Republican Party. And so I support the amendment of Mr. Nichols.
Okay, any further discussion against this amendment? Yes.
Ken Leonard, SD 8. As I said before, Jim Pickle made it clear that we don't want to mess too much with this document. It has been looked at, and I would hesitate to change it any. And if we vote this down, I think I'd like to see an up or down vote whether we accept it the way it's written.
So if we vote this down, that would take it back to the original SREC language?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Sandy Kent, SD 18. I'm supporting this measure. As a county chairman, I'm bound by state statute. And to just say, no, we're just going to push it to a lawsuit to try to force the hand. If we're a party of law, we have to follow the law. I have to follow the law. And I'm not willing to put myself into a lawsuit just because we here decide that we can't force our legislators to listen to us. That's our job also as citizens, is to force our legislators to listen to us. And I don't believe that just saying, well, forget it, we're just going to go to lawsuit. And, oh, well, the county chairs, don't worry, we're going to support them if they get sued. That's not something I'm willing to sign on for.
Okay, we've actually had a couple for, we need one more against just to balance it out. Are you against?
Mr. Chair?
I'm against. Okay.
Chairman. Chairman Brandon Hodges, SD 31. I'm against this amendment because for several reasons. One, we've already been through this. This isn't an election. This is the selection process. Two, I think the attorneys over here have some things conflated, some arguments. We're not restricting ballot access to anyone. We're just telling them if you want to vote in the Republican primary as a Republican, then you have to be registered as a Republican. We're trying to cut down on what we could consider fraud by lying. So I appreciate the fact that we're going back in the 1920s and discussing cases, and we could talk about Tammany Hall from New York and all that. But the fact of the matter is, we talked earlier about the 60% rule that a lot of people supported in here. This was approved by over 70% of the Republican voters, and so it's a majority. It is our duty to do what our constituents in our Senate districts tell us to do. I do not believe that this is unlawful, because it is unlawful for someone to commit fraud and lie to you. And if we do not put pressure on the state legislature to act on this, then we are going to all be bankrupt, because we are going to lose the entire state of Texas, and we will have allowed it to happen to ourselves because we're scared of going to lawsuit. Who cares?
let's end up in a lawsuit. And SD 31, if we let the Democrats take over the whole state, we will all be bankrupt because they'll all get in office and you can kiss the oil and gas business goodbye. So I'm absolutely against this. Thank you.
Okay, we're
Mr.
out of
Chairman,
time.
a friendly amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Josh?
Friendly amendment. Josh Flynn, SD 15.
Quickly.
Our state secretary arduously went through our rules to remove all the and ors, and my friendly amendment would just be to remove the word and slash and just make it or.
It's working now.
Oh, no objection.
And Mr. Nichols just said no objection to that. It's a great amendment.
Well, you know.
Okay, but we ready to vote then? And what we're voting on is Justin's amendment in 2 greens and the strikeout in red. If we vote this down, we go back to the original SREC language. We go from there. So all in favor of this amendment, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nay! The nays have it. That takes us back to the original SREC language.
Mr.
All
Chairman.
this will be a roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment that I've submitted to you a long, long time ago that's on the screen.
I'm not advised of an amendment,
No.
Eric.
It's real.
That one's mine.
Mr. Pickle mentioned that we need to keep this as simple as possible. So the language that is in Jerry Fisher's inbox there, and also
Not in
your
mine.
inbox as well. I'll read it because it's very simple. The Republican Party of Texas will conduct a closed primary as authorized by law. To the extent the Texas legislature does not authorize a closed primary in the 89th Texas legislature, the Republican Party of Texas shall challenge the authority to preclude the Republican Party of Texas from holding a closed primary in federal or state court.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Mike Snyder, SD9. That is not an amendment. That is a complete rewrite of that bill. That is not an amendment.
It's an amendment by substitution. Mr.
Well, it would be an amendment by substitution, and if that's what it is, I oppose it.
An amendment by substitution is allowed in the rules.
He did not define it as that.
That's a distinction without a...
I don't remember if he said that or not. He did when you questioned it. He did when you, and so if we vote this down, it goes back to the original language of the SREC.
Call the question.
Can he speak to his motion?
Call the question.
I called the question, and there's a second.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Point of order. Our rules have something to say about previous question that we have at least a reasonable time of debate, and the person who made the motion hasn't even spoken to it yet.
Well, I have a clarifying question then for the calling the question. Did you mean on this particular question or all the way back?
We called the question before this amendment was offered, and there was a second to it. And then this amendment was offered after call the question was asked and seconded.
No,
I'm sorry, I did not hear that. So,
Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear it either. I got your attention was recognized, and I didn't hear a calling of the question until after I had read my motion.
I heard the call to question. I did not hear the second.
Mr. Chair, everybody on this side of the room heard me call the question before before Eric spoke. Ken Leonard, SD8.
In the interest of being fair, I'm going to go ahead and allow a vote on Eric's substitution language. If it fails, we'll come back to the SREC language at that point.
Point of order, if we're going to vote on this, then the question's not been called here until he, number one, gets to say what he needs to say, and two, that we have an opportunity to oppose the motion.
He does not have to speak on it if the question gets called.
Do we have the ability then to speak in opposition?
No. Well, we need to vote on it. We haven't voted on it. Y'all ready to vote on calling the question?
Point of information.
Who said that?
Mac Duncan, SD3.
Yeah, Mac.
Okay. Where is this going to be replaced in Rule 44, or is it replacing? I'm 46, I'm sorry. Okay, substitute the whole thing. So we're just wiping out what Mr. Pickle submitted, and this would be exclusively what we would be looking at as Rule 46. Just making sure.
Everybody ready? All in favor of effectively striking the SREC language and substituting Eric's language, signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry. We're voting on calling the question first. Yes, thank you. All in favor of calling the question on the substitute amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition?
No.
The ayes have it. We're now voting on the substitute language. All in favor of the substitute language, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. No! The nays have it. That takes us back to the SREC. I hear a call the question. Do I hear a second?
Second. Point of order. Wait a minute. I've had an amendment. I've been waiting patiently. I haven't said anything about this rule, and I have an amendment that I'd like to make that I actually, Mr. Pickle gave me his blessings to make this particular amendment, and I'd like to offer it. Before we call the question, we should all be able to speak. So I would like to make my motion. Yes, please.
The proper way to handle that, I believe, would be to vote down calling the question. Once the question's been called, I don't believe it's in order to...
I tried to get my motion in before they called the question, and I was not, he got in front of me. Like I said, this motion has the blessing of Mr. Pickle. And if the intent is to have what we're wanting to do is a good bill or a good rule, we need to look at what I'm talking about.
Point of order.
And it actually, go ahead.
Point of order, SD2, Randall Dunning. I think a point of order was used to introduce an amendment, and I think that's out of order.
The proper way out of this in the chair's mind is the committee decides whether to call the question or not. If we don't call the question, then, Josh, I would call on you after that. So we're voting on calling the question at this point. And I believe, in the opinion of the chair, this should be a roll call vote.
Calling the question, it just means we're going to...
Roll call.
Mr. Chairman, can we please clarify exactly what we're calling the question on? Are we calling it on removing? No, are we calling the question on the original language or with the modification? On the original language. The original language, so. We need to correct on the screen so we have the correct. There it is. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
We're calling the
Very good. Thank you, sir.
To call the question.
We're voting on calling the question. Right.
Right. Christine Bentley?
No.
Randy Dunning?
No.
Mac Duncan?
No.
John Boucher? No. Dwayne Wright?
No.
Keith Nielsen? No. Russell Rush? Yes.
Ken Leonard,
Yes.
Mike Snyder,
Yes.
Susan Valiant, Dave Wilson,
Yes.
Ronnie Jones,
Yes.
Rachel Hooper, Eric Opiella,
No.
Josh Flynn,
Nope.
Nate Joy,
No.
Caleb Pallado,
Yes.
Sandra Kent,
No.
David Westbrook,
No.
Kathy Hagler.
No.
I think I missed Chuck Burnett. Leslie Thomas. Rick Cook.
No.
Bruce Campbell.
No.
Naomi Nerez. Justin Nichols.
No.
Susan Guggenheim.
No.
Tim Lambert.
No.
Brooks Coleman.
No.
Mark Russell. And Brandon Hodges.
Clearly, the noes have it. I think out of respect for Josh. So, Josh.
I'm truly humbled, and I appreciate that vote very much. There is a thing that has been brought up with regard to kids that are just out of high school, that are age 21 or under. So this is just an additional proviso. If they voted in a Democrat primary somehow after their 18th birthday and before their 21st birthday, then they would be barred from this because that's one of our other provisos. But when we have a kid, it comes to the election, half the time when they're that young, they don't even know that they're voting in a primary in the first place. They just know that they're supposed to go vote. They're too young to be spoiled by Democrat ideology, but not too young to be disenfranchised by the Republican Party. We turn around and they sit there and say no, the Democrats say, well, come over here and vote. Okay, and this is just, like I said, for 21 and under. If, you know, like, and the big thing that I guess got everybody looking at was Mr. Pickle looked at it and he said, he gave me my blessing to make that happen. So it's just an additional proviso. The individual voting in their first primary election and is under the age of 21.
Point of information.
Can we see all of that and for the benefit of the members not sitting in a U-shaped configuration, we just got a big thumbs up from Jim in the back, so.
Point of information.
Yes.
Ronnie Jones, SD12. Are we saying that they are actively at the poll voting? Or should we say that they're registered to vote?
Well, yeah, they would have to be registered to vote.
Okay, so voting and registered to vote are two totally different things. So, because that was confusing me right off the bat because it sounded like they're showing up to vote, and we're gonna allow that just because they're under 21 and it's their first primary.
I think that's covered in the other provisos. You have to be attained 18 and not affiliated. It says you have to have voter identification. Everything is in that first paragraph. That has nothing to do with this.
Then is this redundant?
No.
Oh, thank you. Okay, y'all ready to vote? Everybody ready? All in favor of Josh Flynn's amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Yes, ma'am.
Leslie Thomas, SD 22. I move that we strike United States citizen and add in Texas, and I move we strike no later than the first day of which a candidate may file.
Second.
Change United States to Texas.
It's better. It's made in Texas.
Well, just put a Texan. who qualifies to vote.
Friendly amendment, a resident. Well, no, that wouldn't, because.
Citizen of Texas, I think is the way Jim Pickle phrased it.
Yeah.
But how do you prove that? That's right.
Well, some of us.
We're
don't
not
do
writing
this.
legislation here.
Yeah, there you go. A registered voter from Texas.
Closer to legislation. Platform.
A registered voter of Texas.
That we can prove.
He meant to say a registered voter.
Registered Texas.
I don't want to say citizens in there.
No.
You can't prove a citizen, but you can prove a registered voter.
Okay, what was the other one, Leslie?
That's also in
Quickly.
another place in it, so just correct that. And then also strike no later than the first day of which a candidate may file. Strike it. Strike it, and it's the whole thing. No substitution.
Where was the other United States?
First paragraph. Only citizens, only registered voters of Texas. There you go. I need a second.
Second.
Re-ghosted. I'm feeling kind of re-ghosted right now.
Tired, Shane?
And David's parking lot's about to close pretty quickly. Is that correct now, Leslie?
I get at least 6 sneezes when it happens. Yep. My dad used to put an ice cube in.
Okay, members, you've heard the amendment.
Can you
We're out
scroll
of.
down?
Oh, scroll down to look at it again.
Make it smaller so it fits the screen.
There you go.
Okay, you've heard the amendment. We're out of debate time unless we extend that.
Microphone.
Okay, we've got a motion to divide the question, presumably between the citizen of Texas versus the United States and this particular section. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
We've got a second. Would you like to speak to your motion? We're out of time, but no?
Sorry. There's several different changes that are being made, and I think when that's being done, it's best to divide it.
Okay. Quickly, any opposition to dividing the question? Seeing none, all in favor of dividing the question, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition?
No.
No. The ayes meekly have it. So we'll divide the question into the Texas registered voter portions, and the other will take the first up first. Any for or against Leslie's divided motion talking about a registered voter of Texas?
So one of the things that I think people don't realize is that military voters registered, who were last domiciled in the state of Texas, actually register to vote through their FPCA application that allows them to vote by mail. And so if this language, they would not be a registered voter of Texas prior to requesting a mail-in ballot in this Republican primary. So this could potentially disenfranchise our military voters who applied to vote, which is also a voter registration application with a federal postcard application.
Any others? We'll vote on the question. We're replacing the language on the United States with the language related to Texas. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. I think the ayes have it. So that portion of the, what? Let's have a show of hands. That might be a little bit faster. All in favor of replacing the United States references to the, to Texas?
That's not true. It seems like it. No, it's not.
No, it's just BS.
Don't falsely accuse.
Okay, the motion passes, 17 votes. Now we go to the second part, and that's striking the deadline, I believe, if I can, right, is that correct? Would you like to speak to that, Leslie?
I need to correct something. So where it says for a place of the gray part that's struck, I need to unstrike that because that guts it. That's essential. I was reading it too quickly. So I need to unstrike that, and it's just no later than the first day.
That's a friendly amendment, okay.
Oh, and the blue stuff needs to be unstruck. So I withdraw my amendment to this because it guts it, according to Mr. Pickle. If you want to substitute something in there to fix it, you can.
So you're withdrawing your amendment?
I withdraw.
Okay, so we're back to the original language of the SREC suggested addition to the rules. Are we ready for the vote?
Yes.
Let's do a roll call vote on this one. We're voting on the original language.
As amended with Texas. Sorry. As amended with Texas.
As amended with Texas. Yes, that's correct.
Kristen Bentley?
No.
Randy Dunning?
Wait, maybe I'm not clear.
Yeah, we're not now voting on Leslie's language. We're voting on the SREC language as amended by Leslie's first part of the divided. We're voting on mostly what was Rule 46 to begin with, or the proposed language.
Thank you for your expressive face.
You know, I was surprised.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and she voted, yeah.
Kristen, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Randy Dunning?
Yes.
Mac Duncan?
Yes.
John Boucher? Yes. Dwayne Wright?
Yes.
Keith Nilsson?
Yes.
Russell Rush?
Yes.
Ken Leonard?
Yes.
Mike Schneider?
Yes.
Susan Valiant?
Yes.
Dave Wilson?
Yes.
Ronnie Jones?
Yes.
Rachel Hooper?
Yes.
Eric Opiella?
No.
Josh Flynn?
Yes.
Nate Joy?
Yes.
Caleb Piatto?
No.
Sandra Kent?
Way out of it.
Sandra?
Not here.
David Westbrook?
No.
Chuck Burnett?
Yes.
Kathy Hagler?
No.
Leslie Thomas?
Yes.
Rick Cook?
Yes.
Bruce Campbell?
Yes.
Naomi Navarez?
Aye.
Justin Nichols?
Aye.
Susan Guggenheim?
Yes.
Tim Lambert?
Yes.
Brooks Coleman?
C, yes.
Okay. Mark Russell? Yes. And Brandon Hodge?
Yes.
By my count, the vote is 25-3, and so the added Rule 36 passes. 46. 46, I said the same thing.
Mr. Chairman, we had 4 no votes.
And did we have 4? Okay, 25-4. Who was the 4th? I only noted, there was an abstention, yes, but.
There's Eric, Caleb, David, and me.
Got it.
14, 17, 19, 22, or 21, and 18 was.
Okay. 26-4, I believe, is the revised count.
I got 27.
Would there be any objection to recessing for the night until in the morning?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mac?
Just a privilege. I want to first of all thank everybody earlier for the prayers. For my daughter, she is stable now and doing better. I want to also thank everyone for the spirited debates, my first experience in the Rules Committee, and I appreciate the camaraderie, the attitude, so very grateful.
Good, thank you. And we just endured a debate far more intense than what I've ever seen on the other 2 committees. So I echo that. I appreciate everybody's patience, and we'll be raring to go and go faster tomorrow. We are recessed until tomorrow at 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, members.
She's just now having it for the first time where the others had it when they were young.
Yeah, the 2 youngest ones have had it for a while. Mine started when I was 12. She is stable on the floor, and heart rate's down.